I want to say congratulations on everything.
You?
What's it like kind of creating this process? Because you do technically have to create these characters based on what they're wearing and tell their stories through that. Could you tell what your process was like for that?
Well, it always starts off with a script, of course. And then with Vigo, we had a lot of discussions, and he sent us also a lot of westerns, some films of what he liked, what he didn't like, what we liked, and so forth. And what happens is that he is such an incredible Renaissance man artist. I mean, even on the film, he directs it, he wrote it, he produced it, he did the composed the music. So what is wonderful about all that is that he has an extensive vocabulary artistically. So he understands and respects as well the whole, like all the different things. And even like when you get excited, when I find like a vintage little silver buttons, let's say for Vivian, he gets just as excited. So it's really kind of thrilling. So all that, and I did his last film as well. So we have a nice shorthand. There's a flow of whose ideas and where it starts from. It just works with also with Carol Spears, the production designer. And so it's a really nice tightly knit nucleus there. Um, but once we have just an initial feel of it, of discussion with Vigo, then I just kind of go on my own world then and just dive into like all the different sections of the world. And as you can see, I've got a few books. And then I just start compiling like just visuals, information about the different things that we'll have to be recreating. And in this one, what was really fun and challenging at the same time is that we have the 1830s and then we have the 1860s. There's not just the Western frontier part of it, which is, the saloon. We had miners, we had, um, uh, gosh, I can't remember just even the frontier of it. Then we have San Francisco. You've got the waterfront. You've got the seamen. You've got all the market stalls. You've got the art salons. You've got the theater. You've got the high society. Then you've got also the 186 and then Chinatown, of course. Then you've got the 1830s, which is where the Vivian's journey starts, and it's 1830s, more settlers, coureurs de bois, British troops. So I just get as much information as I can. And then I make boards. So these are kind of these lookbooks. And that's kind of the Bible of the film. And it just gives you the pulse of it, the texture of it, the colors of it, and then research on each of these different areas. And it's what's wonderful about lookbooks is that, first of all, you get a language that's everyone kind of understands visual better than sometimes even words. And then when an actor arrives, I'm usually the first one they meet, and they start to dive into the world of what we're going to be doing. And so to see these lookbooks always helps, and I usually plaster them like all over the wall, and then it's kind of like, oh, I'm in this world now, okay. And it's not just about them, it's about the whole film. So I do those, and that's takes a while between researching on the internet to researching from books to researching going to art galleries, looking at painters and artists and so forth. Um, then the nitty gritty starts, and it's like we can't make everything, but we need to create all the worlds for all the extras. And then in this instance, I think we wanted to have a real honesty. We wanted to have a reality about it, because it's a Western, but it's on Vivian's point of view, more or less. And it's a love story at the same time, but it's a real love story. It's not sugar coated. Um, and, it's what's I found really interesting about it was that it was the Western, and it's a female voice, and it's to be heard in a very harsh world that's more patriarchal, that's more male. And how do you keep that voice and stand by it and have your confidence? And it's not that far off to now. It still is, unfortunately, some of the issues that we're still having. And I think that's why the audience is really relating, because it happens to be, our story is in the 1860s, but it's about a story. It's not about necessarily just being a Western. And then how do we visually help that, move that along? With For Vivian, one of the threads that we kind of that keeps through the film is the ceinture fléchée, which is her father was a coureur de bois, and it started with that, and then you see the pulse of it as you go. And Vivian being the heartbeat of the story, we decided to make her, like, the young Vivian is in kind of a warm red terracottas. And then as we go into, we flip to 30 years later in San Francisco, she's more into salmon colors and a little bit more saturated, a little bit. But, and then once she goes out into the Wild West, in the frontier time place, then it's kind of softer, and just to kind of juxtapose with the harsh world that she's going into. And then it was like, okay, so when she leaves from San Francisco to go out, through the mountains and arrives in, Elk Flats, what does she pack on her horse? What does she bring with her? And that kind of determined and the essence of who she is. And in some ways, it was recreated when we were making the film, because it was quite, it's independent film, so we don't have the big huge Hollywood budgets. We have to be somewhat prepared or whatever. We started off my assistant and I, going to Spain, going to Paris Costumes, and we pulled as much as we could. This was even before we had locations settled, that we knew what kind of and how many extras we were going to have. So we just thought, okay, what do you think we could need? Kind of like Vivian was preparing herself, but we were in a grander, different way. And we brought, so we just pulled and pulled and pulled. Then because Mexico, our main area to prep was in Mexico, and they don't have any period costume rental houses. So, which could get tricky, being in the 1860s and 1830s. So, Paris also made us a whole variety of different dresses for us, custom made by my designs and all that. And then we were able to, and then they shipped everything to Mexico City. But then at the same time, I had a crew that was prepping in Mexico City. I had a crew in Durango, which is where we prepped and shot most of the film. I had another crew in Ontario prepping that part of it. And then I had another crew in BC to prep that part. So some of the challenges were as well of doing virtual fittings, choosing fabrics, choosing colors, discussing breakdown. So it was tricky. And then we were in Mexico City at one point to do a good part of it, the prepping. Then we packed up everything. It was kind of like going on a buggy and going across America, but it was on trucks instead. And then we arrived in Durango, which is at the bottom of the hills of the Sierra Madre. And the locations were stunning. They were absolutely mind-boggling. But with that, it became a bit tricky. To get to A to B, like we were on dune buggies, ate a lot of dust. Sometimes on horses, sometimes God knows. We were in scorpion country, so we had to be very aware of that. So it had a few challenges, but my gosh, it was rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I watched the film, and one of the things that
Okay.
did stand out to me was the costumes.
Okay.
I'm wondering, all the effort you went through that you just talked about, do you have a favorite outfit or one that stands out to you in the story?
Um, there's kind of two. The one that her traveling outfit, which is kind of a bit more prissy, primer, with the bonnet and the wool coat and the skirt, and then the Saint Fléché again. And it's kind of an innocence that she's there. And then once she's arrived, and then the transformation of once she's, lived a few things out in the desert. Um, I love when she then starts wearing Olson's Stetson and her shawl and her skirt, but there's a softness to it, but there's also a real strength behind it. And so I like those two. I love Olson. I just, I was trying to think, what can we design for him instead of just being in a frock coat and kind of gets a little just a vest, you know what I mean? But because he's a working man, he's a carpenter. And so I designed this kind of Carhartt jacket, but of a period one. It's a cut of the period, but we had canvas. We dyed it kind of in a tan Carhartt color a little bit and really broke it down. So that was kind of his working jacket. And then she also starts wearing it as well at some point when there's a real kind of flow to it all. So probably some of those two would be some of my favorite. And then I would probably say the other would be Vincent, the father, when he goes off in the canoe and just being of French Canadian background and to, I think I nailed it pretty good. Some of my heritage. So I think I'm doing honor to my heritage there. And so that's good.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if you could describe your inspiration as a whole, because I know you said you had lookbooks and everything, if you could describe it in 3 words, what would they be?
Um, passion, passion, warmth, and reds,
Okay, fair enough.
maybe.
And I know you did say that it's a female voice film. I'm wondering, how important is it to you, or do you think in the industry that you do have female costume designers for female voiced or female led projects just to get on the same wavelength?
Um, I think there needs to be female representation across the board and everything, you know, um, and that it's heard and that it's seen. Um, we're half the population, whatever creed, color we are. Um, we need to stand and we need to be um, participating in it as Vivian is in this world.
Definitely. And I mean, if you could tell yourself when you were younger, or just any up and coming artists and designers, and a piece of advice that you've learned from this production as a whole, what would it be?
I think whatever you do, you have to give yourself 150 and believe it and just trust in it, and it will guide you, it will shape you. Sometimes you don't know why something's happening when you're in the middle of it, but down the road you kind of go, ah, that was why this and this and that. But as long as you um, love doing what you do, things will definitely evolve. If you're doing it just for a paycheck, well, enjoy your pina colada afterwards, I guess. I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah, but thank you so much for everything, and congratulations again on the
Thank
film.
you.